Thank you. That's awesome. If there's a record of how many people you get to selfie with, maybe we should start taking notes. um, we're just getting ready here. I just still curious, who else have completed all the challenges, at least 20 points? You wanna clap? Yeah, okay. We actually still have lots of rewards available, so do claim them. And the good thing is, if you don't have time to actually enjoy the ice creams, you can come back next year. Are we ready? Oh, great. So let's welcome the Python Steering Council, who are 5% elected members who are mandated to lead the Python community to ensure the quality of the Python. And I would like to welcome the Steering Council members of this year: Pablo Galindo, Gregory P. Smith, Thomas Wouters, Emily Morehouse, and Barry Warsaw.
Well, there we go. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great PyCon. Let's see. I just lost all my notes. There we go. Okay, so I'm Barry Warsaw, and before we get started, I do want to mention that we hope to have time for questions at the end, and there are microphones set up in the aisles for you. So we're going to talk about the Steering Council. Raise your hand if you have ever heard of the Steering Council. That's pretty good. Keep your hand up if you know what the Steering Council actually does. Okay, awesome. The Python Steering Council, or as it's sometimes referred to as the PSC or the SC, is a 5-person elected governance body responsible for making decisions about the evolution of the Python language, the CPython interpreter, and the standard library. And the PSC is separate from the PSF in that the PSC is responsible for the technical direction of Python, but we work very closely together on many topics. So why does the PSC even exist? When Guido retired as the BDFL, the core developers got together and proposed several governance models for the future of the language. And a lot of debate happened, and eventually the core developers voted, and so the model that we have now for the Python Steering Council is the one that was accepted by all the core developers. You can see up here, if you look at PEP 13, that's the constitution that explains how we operate, how elections happen, and things like that. But in general, elections happen annually. They're roughly aligned with the Python releases, so a short amount of time after a release happens, we open things up for nominations, and then those nominations are open for a couple of weeks, and then the core developers vote for the next term of the Python Steering Council. Members generally serve for 1 year, but they can run for re-election, and there are no term limits. The Steering Council itself is elected by the core developers, and candidates have to be nominated by a core developer. Self-nominations are allowed, but you don't actually have to be a core developer to serve on the Steering Council. One other interesting constraint is that no more than 2 members can work for the same company, and that sort of keeps things very democratic. So who are we? I'm Barry Warsaw, and to my left we have Emily Morehouse, Thomas Wouters, Greg Smith, and Pablo Galindo. And each one is going to come up and speak for a few minutes. 2024 is actually the 6th council term, and every election cycle is sort of codified in a PEP, and PEP 8105 is the 2024 council. Okay, so that's who we are, but what do we actually do? Sort of just operationally, we meet almost every week for 90 minutes, and we have lots of discussions about lots of topics, and there are many ways to get agenda items into our discussions, including our public GitHub tracker. And that tracker is actually how PEP authors will inform us that PEPs that they've authored or sponsored are ready for our pronouncement. So an important task, and depending on sort of the release cycle, this may happen more often or less often, but an important task for us is to pronounce on PEPs. But we often delegate those decisions to other councils or working groups and things like that, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Ultimately, the Steering Council does have the final say on any particular PEP. And the council, sort of the not fun part of what we do is that we are tasked with enforcing the code of conduct. It doesn't happen too often, but when it does, that's an important thing that we do to keep all of our Python workspaces safe for everyone. And sort of a new responsibility this year was that the council chose the next release manager, and we'll talk about that as well. We're regularly joined by Deb Nicholson, the PSF Executive Director, that keeps a very close contact with the Steering Council and the PSF. And we're often, I think about every week, joined by Luca Schlanga, the developer in residence, and that sort of keeps a very tight connection between the Steering Council and what's actually happening day to day in CPython. So that's a general overview, and I'm going to turn it over to who? Greg next? Okay, Greg.
All right. One interesting thing that we also do is, at this point, helping tell the PSF where to spend money to improve CPython. This wasn't something we really anticipated when we first, got the Steering Council, but basically, several things have been happening. I'm going to go into detail on these in farther slides and exactly what they are, but basically we have several developers, plural there is the new thing, that's great, in residence, actually working on CPython itself. We have our security developer in residence, and new announcement today, we're actually getting a Steering Council secretary, more on that in a bit. We also deal with funding the annual core developer sprints, and these are the ones we do kind of, off sync with PyCon. That's usually in, August or September, October, something like that. This is just a week-long thing where we all get together to actually focus only on CPython instead of everything else in the world, kind of channeling Samana with too many things we're trying to do. So, our developers in residence, I've been on the Steering Council, I think this is my third term, so when Lukasz was selected as our first developer in residence, that was before me. This was an amazing thing. We always knew we wanted a team of people. Have to start somewhere. Lukasz had the job of basically proving that this actually worked. Developers in residence run, basically they're managed by the PSF, they're focused on CPython. We give them guidance on which things we'd like them to focus on as much as we actually need to. This worked, we attracted more funding, and now we have two more. So Peter and Sergey have joined us. It's actually a team. I always figure once you have beyond two people, you can actually call it a team. You can actually interact and work together. Our security development residence. We got Seth hired for that role. We interviewed a whole bunch of people. We interviewed all the people from the previous developers in residence too. Lots of qualified candidates. We sorely needed someone to help do this work. Seth tooted his own horn this morning. That's great. If I, off the top of my head, try and give a quick summary of things that Seth has accomplished, even within the less than a year it's been, getting us set up as a CNA, the CVE numbering authority, if I even know what the acronym means, which gives us control over what CVEs get assigned to CPython instead of just letting random people on the internet decide what they think are problems, whether they are or not, and give them scores. Determining scores, triaging bugs, helping with fixes to bugs. That list could go on for a long time. Like, all of this stuff is really important to have someone actually paid and dedicated to help doing this kind of work. New. So I'd like to announce that we have extended an offer to Velda, who is somewhere in the audience. I'm wherever you are. Over there, all right. This has been kind of a long time coming. We first discussed this with the rest of the core devs back in, I guess it was probably back in September or October. We have a goal as a steering council of regularly communicating what we're working on, what are things we've discussed. We haven't been doing a good job of that. If you look at our summaries of what the steering council meetings have been, our meeting minutes, they are kind of way behind. So we realized we needed actual professional help on this. We've kind of been rotating the duty around us, but we don't actually always complete all the things. This role can go beyond what we're calling secretary here. That's just a title, but we're also looking at it as like even some project management of the light-handed form of just making sure we get our little action items done, which can include things like go reread that PEP, go reread the discussion thread, reach out to the community members we don't think we're quite represented in discussions and decisions we want to make. Just having someone that actually looks at us and says, yeah, you just need to actually do this so we don't keep forgetting and reminding ourselves and take too long. Hopefully this improves our velocity and our communication. She's going to go do the paperwork for actual PSF employment and whatever all that entails, but this will be a great thing to have an actual secretary on board. So Core Dev Sprints, I mentioned briefly about that. That is our annual event, but basically if you think of Core Devs existing all over the world, flying in, hotels, venues, a lot of that is often donated by, say, a sponsoring corporation or so not. But the costs add up. So the PSF is there to cover the costs for additional things. We basically give guidance on what's reasonable for that. And often it's easier for sponsors to donate directly to the PSF and have the PSF handle the funding. That's just a well set up money pipeline. So those are the things we're spending money on. I am using some bad words, so I better go put some stuff in the bucket after this here. We need this funding to be sustainable. I think I'm tying into a theme of the day without us even coordinating on this. Employing people, that's serious stuff. They're taking a risk in their life to take this employment. They don't know how long this job lasts if you only have a fixed amount of funding for, say, a year or two. So sustainable funding is very important. If everybody here were to say, I just said sustaining and go put $50 in that jar behind here, that would employ a lot of people. So please fund the PSF. I'm sure you'll hear more of that from other people later. I believe next up, Emily?
All right, hello. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the councils and working groups and what has changed for those over the last year. So as Python has evolved as a language and as a community, the requirements for people to help us has also grown, as we've talked a lot about. So just as Python's governance model has gone through changes to make it more sustainable, we've added additional groups that actually report to the steering council to focus on specialized areas. So these groups contribute and take ownership of certain parts of the language and its ecosystem. And the steering council actually delegates certain decision-making operations fully to these groups. So depending on their function, these are either formed as councils or working groups. So these groups are actually proposed and formed in the same way that changes to the Python language are made. So this is made through PEPs that the steering council reviews and decides upon. And these groups offer really invaluable ways for us to offload some of the decision-making and management of parts of the Python ecosystem to people who are truly experts in those areas. So my favorite part is that some of these groups actually review and pre-approve PEPs in specialized areas. And so to me, this says two things about a certain area. One is that it is something that is overwhelmingly complex, and also that it truly requires a dedicated group of people to focus solely on that area. So we've had 3 changes to these groups in the last year, which I'll go through somewhat quickly. So the first is the documentation working group and editorial board. So the docs working group was formed in April of 2021 as a group of the community to focus on these general documentation related issues and pull requests. And so since then, they've actually formalized a separation between an official governing board and the sort of wider group of volunteers who serve as additional contributors. So PEP 732 introduced the Python documentation editorial board. This was accepted in December of 2023. So we now have 2 groups with much better names because naming things is hard. So we now have the documentation editorial board that serves as the trusted group that was formed by the PEP. And now the docs working group now refers to this sort of greater set of volunteers who contribute to the documentation. The initial members of the board are Marietta, Ned, Joanna, Guido, and Carol Willing. The editorial board has a wonderful list of all of their motivations, mandates, responsibilities, all listed out in the PEP. But to summarize, the items that are in scope for them to review include the CPython documentation at docs.python.org, the CPython dev guide at devguide.python.org, as well as translations of the CPython docs, as well as some greater tooling and infrastructure to support those areas. And for now, this specifically does not include code comments and doc strings in CPython, PEPs and PyPA documentation, and the general Python website at python.org. Next up, we have the C API working group. This was introduced in PEP 731, which was accepted in November of 2023. So this PEP established a small committee of Python core developers who are responsible for overseeing and coordinating the development and maintenance of Python's C API, which, very briefly, if you don't know what the C API is, it's CPython's API that exposes certain aspects of Python internals and direct access to the Python interpreter from C and C++, if you so choose, as sort of a bridge between the two languages. The C API working group is made up of 5 Python core developers: Guido, Peter, Victor, Steve, and Irit. And so they're tasked with the pre-approval and management of PEPs related to the C API. So they very specifically will actually be called upon to sort of look at a PEP before it hits the steering council and make sure that, one, that community consensus is reached, and that they sort of have a general feeling of whether or not a PEP should be approved or not. So generally, they work to decide what to expose in the API, how to guarantee what's exposed, and how to actually expose it. So they maintain documentation, test suites, and tooling all related to this C API. And this takes a lot of work. The C API is very heavily depended on, but it's often used in ways that we don't know exactly how it's used. So we don't know if something is going to break when a change is made. So they maintain 2 repos in the C API working group organization on GitHub. One is the API evolution, and one is the API revolution. And so I really appreciate that they have taken these 2 very distinct approaches, recognizing that there is a short term for the C API as well as a long term. And our final new group is the Typing Council, which was formed in PEP 729. This was also accepted in December of 2023, I believe. So Python's type system has been added gradually to Python over the last about 10 years. I think it was introduced in Python 3.5, which was back in 2015. And since then, the type system has really evolved over a series of PEPs. So this is a very highly specialized area, but it's also one in which core developers haven't necessarily always been the primary group to develop and maintain, since much of Python's type system is actually outside of the language itself. So the initial members of the Typing Council are Eric, Guido, Yella, Rebecca, and Shantanu. And so they also have a very detailed PEP about their mandates, motivations, and processes. But it can essentially be summarized as ensuring that Python's type system remains useful, primarily for static analysis, but also for runtime type checking, static compilation, IDE support, and documentation. They also ensure that the type system is usable, meaning that it should be very ergonomic, well-documented, while remaining simple enough for new developers to understand, but also complex enough to adequately type Python code, which is a very in-depth conversation that I know we're still having a lot of. They also make sure that it's stable, with care taken for backwards compatibility, consistency of the meaning, and interpretation of types. They also have a set focus on improving both the type spec as more of an internal documentation for the type system, as well as sort of a user-facing reference for how to properly use the type system. And in roughly the 6 months since they've formed, they've provided multiple recommendations to the steering council for typing-related PEPs that have been accepted, which Thomas will talk about shortly.
So in case you're wondering why we're doing this awkward dance of switching who's presenting, last year we just had Brett present and everyone else seated on the podium, and we got some feedback that that was weird. So maybe this is less weird. We'll see. So I'm the release manager of Python 3.12 and 3.13, and I'm here to talk about what's new in Python 3.13, as we traditionally do. Now, Marietta has shown us a new way of presenting release notes, and I want to copy that. So I copy that. Of course, we don't use, even though we have a yearly release cycle, Python 3.13 will come out in October, as every Python release since 3.9. We don't actually use the year in the version number, although the next, the release manager for the next two versions, Hugo, who's in the audience right there, has proposed that we switch to Calvert. So maybe we don't get Python 3.14, maybe we get Python v2025, who knows? So what's exciting about Python 3.13? Actually, not so much. No new syntax, no new modules. Now, as a release manager, I am ecstatic because nothing can break, right? Well, not so much. So we came to the end of a 5-year journey for PEP 594, which deprecated a whole lot of standard library modules. These are modules that are little used or awkward or have better things in the standard library or better third-party packages that do the same thing. There's some other removals that were not in PEP 594 as well. We also removed many deprecated functions and classes from modules, and these were things that were warning for years, so nobody should be surprised, right? We may be putting some back if it turns out it's too disruptive. We'll see. And then the same thing with C API functions. The private C API functions, many of those were moved to separate header files, so they're not directly visible. We may have to put some back when we get there. And then there are some exciting type annotation changes if you care about those, better ways of annotating various things, easier to use. That's the sort of broad overview of the typing changes. And then we also have some platform support changes. We decided, because it was a little weird that we only supported a Python version for 1.5 years with regular bug fixes, that we extend that to 2 years. And then we have 3 years of security fixes only afterwards. So we still have 5 years of support for security, but 2 years for actual bug fixes. We also added support for iOS, and we're adding support for Android as soon as the BuildBot is there. Now that doesn't mean you can go and download an app that is Python, but it makes it easier for people to develop apps using Python. And that's a very long process that we're all very happy to see actually land. And then also we promoted macOS on Apple Silicon, so that's the M1, M2, et cetera, to Tier 1 now that GitHub actually offers it as part of its CI. So that's Python 3.13. Beta 1 is out now. You can download it. You can read the what's new documentation. There's 3 more betas coming. There's a release candidate at the end of July, probably July 30th. First release in the first week of October, probably October 1st. It kind of depends on what day I feel like releasing. And then the release schedule is in PEP 719. So why should you even upgrade if there are no exciting features here? Well, there are no big exciting features, but there are a whole bunch of smaller exciting things. We improved error messages again. We have many bug fixes, some of which can't be backported to 3.12 because the 3.12 release manager is a stickler for backward compatibility. There's a bunch of smaller features in standard library modules, like the DBM module has a SQLite 3 backend. They're all listed in the What's New in Python 3.13 doc that I encourage everyone to read because we spend a lot of time writing it. And of course, you can't upgrade to 3.14 or whatever that version is going to be called without also fixing all the things you need to upgrade to 3.13, so why not get a head start? Now, this feels a bit bad, and Pablo right there and Łukasz, the developer in residence, decided to do something at the very last minute that they have talked about a little bit in their comedy podcast, which is a new... If you haven't listened to the podcast, it's very entertaining. It's a new interactive interpreter that supports color. It supports multi-line editing and multi-line history, paste support. It's based on PyPy's interpreter, and they share a lot of code, so sharing bug fixes and all that. It's on by default if the platform is supported. Right now, Windows isn't supported, but that's a work in progress. And here, let me just do a live demo. As you can see, the arrows are colored, and you can use tab to indent. If you make a typo, as I always do, you can go back and fix it, just up arrow, it just works. You can also paste, just paste right into it, and it'll automatically work if your terminal... if your terminal supports it. I didn't expect applause in the middle of it, so I do apologize. The pasting support requires some terminal support. There's also the F3 button. If your terminal doesn't support, you can enter paste mode manually. And then the pasting also, if you have syntax errors, it still enters the buffer, so you can still up arrow, fix the code, and run it. And then you can press F1. Oh, sorry, if you have tracebacks, they're colorized now as well. That was a separate change, but it's still nice. You can press F1 to enter help, which is the interactive help we always had. You can also type help, and then you don't need parentheses anymore. You can press F2 to see your history, and then you can copy paste it, and then, like I said, you can press F3 to enter paste mode. The prompt changes there at the bottom. And then if you want to quit, you can type quit. And I said there's no exciting changes. There are some exciting changes. They're not actually on by default, and I don't expect a lot of people to use them, but they are still exciting. We have a just-in-time compiler for Python now. And the amazing benefit of it is approximately no slowdown, which is pretty amazing for a JIT. Like I said, it's not enabled by default. It uses copy and patch, so it makes the build of Python itself more complicated, but it doesn't affect, shouldn't affect your actual Python programs. And right now, no actual speed benefit, except in maybe rare cases, but in the future, hopefully, a lot of improvement there. And then we have another optional exciting thing that Pablo is going to talk about.
Awesome. So as the steering council member with the funniest accent, I go last, so at least you can see a bit of the presentation. Cool. So I'm here to talk about like PEP 703, which is making the global interpreter lock optional in CPython. So something that I've been told is that we've been, like, as we work on Python quite a lot ourselves, we forget that sometimes people don't understand what is the problem that we are solving, removing the GIL. And as humans are mainly graphical animals, and we like graphical representations. Let me explain to you in a way it's very easy to understand. So normally you can have a bunch of CPU cores, but normally in Python you have only one core that is actually doing any work, while the other ones are sitting around. And this is a quite problem. There is the GPU as well, but like that's a different problem. So the idea of this PEP is to basically solve this situation and make everyone here do some work, so everything is nice. The GPU again for another day, maybe next year. Cool. So this is quite complicated, and I'm here to explain basically what is going to be the plan. So the idea is that this is not going to be something that we are going to release immediately, but as you will see, there is some support already on Python 3.13 that you can start testing. And what I want to transmit you from the steering council is that we want to be extremely careful about how we're going to proceed from here. Basically, the plan that we have is that the long-term goal is that we will only have this build. So in the future, hopefully, Python will only be free-threaded, which means that it will not have the GIL. And we don't want to maintain basically a split forever of two interpreters here, one that has the GIL and one that has not. So the idea is that at the end, after 5+ years, hopefully, maybe less, we will end with only one Python that doesn't have the GIL. But for us, it's very important, and I want to reassure all of you that we really want to focus a lot on backwards compatibility. And you will say, well, Pablo, but like, I want this now. Why I cannot have it now? Well, let me show you again with a graphical example. We want to avoid this, right? I call this image Python 2 to Python 3. we don't want to be here, right? And we want to ensure that this doesn't happen. And just to continue with the joke, something that we also want to be very clear is that Python without the GIL is not Python 4. Like, we don't want to just basically say we jump another higher version and there's going to be a bunch of incompatibilities that we want everybody to suffer. So the plan for the steering council is basically to go very slowly, understand what the community, the experience with the community is regarding the change, and also check with the core development team, because like these changes are quite complicated, and we want to ensure that it's not 1 or 2 people in the planet that understands the code, right? That maybe not be the most ideal situation. So we want to enable a plan that allows not only the core development team to be comfortable with the changes that are going to be done, but also the community as well, because obviously, as you will see, this needs support from the community. Things are not going to just work by default, so we want to do this very slowly. So this is the plan. The plan is to start focusing on community support. And this is important because this is also like a call to action. Like, we need you to test this thing as much as possible. So if you're a package maintainer, we want you to download free-threaded builds and tell us what doesn't work. If you're a library maintainer, for instance, and you find that supporting free-threaded Python is quite challenging, we want you to tell us. Because this is very important. It's the only way we will know what is not working, and it gives us the possibility to fix things around. We also want time for the core developers to gain enough experience with the changes that are required. These changes are quite long, and they are quite complicated in some cases, so we need time for everyone to understand like what is changing, why it's changing, and how to support it. Also, because the changes change the model in the C API layer, we want to develop new C APIs to ensure like basically thread safety, because what we don't want is that the failure mode for Python code is to crash. So we need to provide new C APIs for library authors to use, and we want those C APIs to be correct. And we may not get those right at the start, so we want to have enough time for people to give us feedback and to tell us what they need, so we expose exactly what is needed in the way that people expect. And we also want you to tell us that this is exactly what you want, because if we find together as a community that the changes, the situation after we do all these changes is not optimal, and the failure modes are not great for different reasons or in different aspects, it's very important to have a decision together. So the plan is the following. We are going to start what we call phase 1, which is what we call experimental phase. This is the one that we are now. So in this case, free-threaded builds are enabled through a build time option. This means that if you have normal Python, it will not have the GIL removed. You need to opt in when you build CPython, when you compile CPython. We don't want this to be the default installation anywhere, so if you type Python 3 on Ubuntu or any other distribution, it should be the normal Python. It should not be the free-threaded Python. We want at least one major Python release to include this experimental build. This will be 3.13. We will see what happens in the next one. And this is the moment when like third-party packages should start downloading these builds that are special, that we will be distributed in special ways. And the idea is that they start to test and experiment and give us feedback of what works and doesn't work, and what APIs are missing, and other things. So the idea is that this is the step that allows people to try it out and see what happens. May it crash, may not, but that's what it keeps it interesting. But the idea as well is that we are making the changes in CPython, so if we find out that for whatever reason it needs to be reverted, we can still do it. So we are not like 100% sold that this is going to happen. We are very careful here. So after this phase is done, we are going to move to phase 2, which is supported but not the default one. So this is like when we ramp up a bit the support, we say, okay, we are comfortable with what we have, so now we are going to start saying like we're going to start freezing APIs. So this is when the API and API changes are stable, so people can start building binary wheels and binary packages that will not require to have changes in the future. This requires obviously enough community support, so everybody has like a good understanding of what's going on, and we don't have like major issues that we need to address. And all these criteria involves everyone. So core developers, that they are fine with what we are exposing, but also like package authors, and obviously the steering council can decide that for whatever reason, if there is a disparity because there is a group that is really happy but a group that is really unhappy, we need to take a decision and we may need to revert it. So at this point we will still have guards in place in case we need to revert it. But in case everything goes correct, we will switch in phase 3, when we'll make it the default. So at this stage, basically the Python with no GIL will be the default Python. There will be only one Python, it will be the one without the GIL. You can still disable it, so this means that the default installation will have the possibility to still run with the guild health. It's just that there is only one Python now, there is no two versions of that. And the idea is that the steering council will decide the timing on when this phase happens, based on basically what we see. So it's basically a plan that is a bit loose, and depending on the feedback that we will receive, we will decide to have it before or after, and obviously also depending on how the core developers feel about it. And the idea is that this is like a dynamic thing when we will check with the community and the core developers quite a lot. Cool. So the idea, what is very important is that we will be continually like checking out like what is working and what is not working, and we will like put a lot of effort to prevent like backwards compatibility struggle, which I know that a lot of people care about, and this is one of the things that some people find very frustrating about Python. So from here, from the steering council, I want to tell you that we really absolutely care about this. We are very excited as you are, but we want to make sure that everybody has a nice experience, and we do this thing as responsible as possible. And again, if in the rare case that hopefully it doesn't happen, but if for whatever reason this becomes really problematic, we are prepared to just call it off and go back to normal Python. So again, very important, the first version that you can try it out is available on 3.13. You still need to activate it with a build time option. So when you build CPython, you need to pass this -- disable guild to the configure step. Hopefully your distribution probably can provide this in different ways. There are some distributions that are providing versions of this, so you don't need to run it yourself. But if you want to configure Python yourself, this is what you need to do. And once you have the Python binary compiled that way, you can activate the guild with an environment variable on a -x option. So you can still build without the guild, but decide that you still want to use the guild to compare if it works or if it doesn't work with and without. And ideally, you can use this thing to just try out your packages and your libraries. You can check if a given build of CPython has the guild enabled. We have this secret flag that you have not seen in the sys module to check if a given build is enabled. You can use this in on your libraries to enable certain code if you see that the guild is enabled or disabled. And you can use sysconfig to basically check if a given Python version was compiled without Git support, because you can enable or disable with the environment variable. Again, I want to be really clear. This is not Python 4, so you should not expect like the same experience again. Many people will say, well, yes, you made it clear, but if you go to the internet, there is a lot of people that are still afraid of this with very good reasons, because they will be traumatized by the experience. So again, we don't want this to be the same. We have learned our lesson. We are going to be really careful. But hopefully this is a success story, and we are really excited. These changes are quite challenging, so we thank the core team for all the effort that are putting into this, and the fantastic welcome that the community has been done, providing like support to build binary wheels with this and to provide the experimental versions in the distributions. So we are quite hopeful that this is going to be a success story with the help of all of you and all the core developers. Cool. And that's everything I have to say. As Barry said, we have here 2 mics if you want to ask us a question, and I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.
I don't think we have time for questions.
Whoops.
We can look at Mariana and say, do we have time for questions?
Yeah, if anybody wants to take...
If there's a question right now, we can try to answer it. Otherwise, find us in the hall or send us email. Oh, I see a familiar face walking to a mic.
Hey.
Are you going to complain about the type annotations not being a major feature?
No, I'm just complaining. Are you sure there are no new syntax features in Python 3.13?
I said no major syntax changes.
I disagree.
There's a small syntax change to support new typing syntax. Okay, find us in the halls or send us email if you want to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you.